until you eventually die and become pure love. Which is just a theory. It's a working theory. We don't actually know for a fact. Okay, welcome to episode 31 of the Vibe Union podcast. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. That sovereignty was never ceded, and we're working towards inclusivity in Vibe Union, as well as hoping to extend that out to the wider community. I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. It's going to be an interesting one because we all have different perceptions of this one concept that we all feel like we experience. And that idea is, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more. Okay, like once you start it, you got to finish it, right? You know, you can't just stop halfway. But yeah, so I guess I'll kind of instigate this conversation with a handful of experiences I had yesterday. It was just a random series of events, and as I was talking to my mother this morning on the phone, it kind of just clicked into place what exactly the theme of yesterday was in my life. And it was me discovering everyone's perception of love. So my morning started off with a buzzing of my phone, and I pick up, and I've got a video call on WhatsApp from my cousin in London. It's midnight there. She's 14 years old, and I'm like half asleep, like, yo, what's going on? She's like, oh my God. I was like, what's up? What's going on? And she's like, oh, she's having boy problems. She's crushing on guys and blah, blah, blah. And she was super flustered. And, I know the feeling being 14 or being a teenager and just like having crushes and having this kind of idea of what love is. And she's telling me about what if this is my soulmate and blah, blah, blah. So this was kind of an interesting way to start my day, grounding my cousin into the root of the earth and being like, hey, you'll only be able to be functional in like going towards the connection if you are grounded. So this is the conversation I had with her. It was kind of puppy love. It was very sweet and innocent, but it was also her perception, her 14-year-old perception of what love was. And so I get changed, jump on the train, heading to Raya's house because we have a gig in Geelong. And as I'm on the train, I have my headphones on and I'm looking up across and I just see a guy banging on the train window, and I take my headphones off just to be like, all right, you're going through something. Out of respect, let me be so present to your situation and just like energetically give to you what I can. Just be with you through this moment you're having on the phone. And when I take the headphones off, all I hear is like, you're leaving me? You're going to leave me like this? I have nobody. You've got your family you go to. I've got nobody. My mom's dead. My dad's dead. I have no friends or family. And it was a very interesting moment to observe because, of course, he was in so much pain. But what I also acknowledged in that moment was that he was not only yelling at this person who he has this idea that he loves, but he was sharing with the entire train how much deep loneliness he had. So was that yelling for her, or was it for us to hear him and to see him and to acknowledge, hey, you're in a lot of pain? And I have nobody. And I almost wanted to just go up to him and be like, you've got you. And that's all you'll ever have. And until you become comfortable with that, it's going to hurt when people come in and out of your life. That's just the nature of. So that was his perception of love. And now fast forward to going to Geelong and meeting Kelsey's family for the first time, seeing them, here and there. But that day I got to see them in their element, in their family home. And immediately, and one of the first things I said when I actually saw them collectively singing together was like, I just feel so much love in this room. And it was the most wholesome, beautiful feeling. She has such an adorable family. And that, to me, that was real love, what I observed. And even like her dad came up to me afterwards and acknowledged what I had said. He's like, I really appreciate that you said that about our family. And, and as I was recounting all this to my mom, it clicked to me like, yesterday was about love and other people's perception of what love is and kind of challenging my own. So now, after that little spiel, I would like to throw it to either of you To just, I know this is a very broad question, but however you feel like expressing, what does love mean to you?
Big question. It's like I've always had the idea, or at least the kind of perception, that there are a variety of different kinds of love. And we touched on this earlier in terms of like the Greeks even have about 7 words for different kinds, but there's different kind of soul connections as well, different kinds of ways that you speak, like love languages and all of that. And a lot of the time you only realize that in hindsight. A lot of the time you don't actually even realize, this connection that I had that is gone, that was so fleeting, or that has, endured the time, and what that kind of love is, and how you kind of position it or see it or categorize it. But I mean, just even the simplest of interactions with someone, which was definitely heightened in the time of COVID, when you had just small acts of kindness, that is a form of love. So I think that you need to, I don't think you need to, but when the question is like, what is love? It's really kind of in any interaction that you have with someone, depending on your intention, I guess. Even like the worst of intentions, there is an underpinning of a sense of love, but that can be self-love. It's an interesting one, and it's very quite complex, and as many things exists within that grey area. It's not so black and white. And once again, everyone has a different perception.
The first thing that came to my mind, especially for this guy on the train, was I think, and this isn't just romantic love, but I think one of the deepest desires for humans is simply to be seen, simply to be seen as we see ourselves, especially. And I think, well, with that particular scenario, like, it seems like that guy is identifying a lot with the pain. Like, this pain is who he sees himself as. Like, this is his existence, and he needs everyone around him to see that. But I just to riff off that. I noticed that big time in the end of my last relationship, that you fall into patterns so much in long-term relationships, especially, and in those moments of pain, and in those moments of kind of chaos, is when you truly see the other person for who they really are, because every expectation, prediction and pattern you were in has suddenly been broken, is falling away, and you were just scrambling. It's like I guess you kind of truly know yourself in moments of danger, moments of panic, moments of chaos in your life, where you have to make split decisions and see what you're kind of made of. I don't know if I believe that wholeheartedly, but I think that's somewhat true. To be seen is one of the most strongest desires, I think, if not the strongest desire, to seek love, to push for love, and when you do feel truly seen, that feels so validating and so freeing as well, I think. That's one form of love, but I agree that there's so many different forms of love, and it's very important to figure out what form of love you need at any given time. Man, I learned a lot from seeing my dad go through the divorce with my mum. Actually, both of them, when they got divorced, and then they both found much more suitable partners for that stage of their life later, and they both seemed genuinely so happy in their next relationships. And for my dad, that one ended, but then he keeps finding new ones, which fucking good on him. Keep balling when you're fucking... I don't know how old he is, in his 60s. Keeps finding ladies. Good on him. He's a good dude. But seeing that, like, they raised 2 fucking awesome kids together, me being one of them, and they were so good together to raise children at a certain point, and they needed a very particular type of love to do that. But once that was kind of done, I think that was kind of the end of it. but then they moved on to a different kind of love later on in their lives, and that kind of taught me a really special thing that was just like, yeah, I mean, you know, certain people last forever. And I think that's actually probably the case for myself in terms of like the type of personality I've got. But everyone's got different stages in their lives, different needs at different times. And so the love changes throughout your life. And for the personality of your partner. I'm totally riffing. That's I don't know actually where to go with that.
Well, I'll jump in. Going based off of like your perception of your parents and the way that they interacted, you know, both with you guys as kids and also with each other, and then post the relationship. Like my experience with my parents is completely different, but I can look at it and I can understand kind of to a degree, distance. This is my perception of them. I don't think they fully formed their own perception of their own kind of love and love languages and sense of relationship and what they were actually searching for. I think a lot of people actually don't, or at least I find that our generation seems to have more of an understanding or idea about, you know, self and self-need and self-want, and also empathy and compassion, and can kind of, you know, we're not so stuck within the black and white thinking. I think that we've kind of grown up in this quite grey era, even if you just like think about the progression of technology and the fact that we've lived in this analog to, you know, yeah. But, you know, they loved each other. Like I won't say that they didn't. It's kind of hard to. I mean, even the simple fact of the fact, like, you know, I remember speaking to someone about this who knew both my parents, and I said, you know, it's quite ironic. They were born 3 months apart in the same year, and they died 3 months apart in the same year. Yeah, and you know, there's this aspect, you know, of heartstrings within your heart. That you can actually snap them at emotional stress, and it causes a heart attack. And the fact that my father had died of a heart attack, you know, I'd said this to a friend and she goes, yeah, they were soulmates. You know, they couldn't not be together. They have to be together in the other world. But as much as I do believe that there was a underlying deep love for each other, they couldn't be together. And they honestly, they couldn't even have kids. And they probably shouldn't. It doesn't mean that I don't love them any less. Doesn't mean that they don't love me any less, or loved me any less, or loved each other any less. It's just simply like, because of their state of being, because of where they were, because of what they did to gain love or to deny it, they were unable to show it, and they're unable to accept it. Both of them, just prior to their passing, had opportunities to get that love that they needed and that they wanted. And unfortunately, it was too late and they couldn't accept it. But yeah, I can't say that the love wasn't there. It's definitely a questionable sense of love. And in, you know, even in their self-love, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't kind and it wasn't good. It came with an intention of survival. And unfortunately that caused difficulties in the ways that I accept love or show love, which is a whole process in and of itself to counteract at that. But it's interesting because you base your love off of what you know love as being. And so, especially with divorce, as you know, children grow up and they see that, they kind of, it whether subconsciously or consciously, it crafts this idea of what a relationship and what love is. On top of that, like how your parents show love, how you receive love as a kid also shapes and crafts your perception and your identity and your idea around what love is and how you show it and what you want from that. Yeah, and so I don't know where I was really going with that, but...
That's cool. Yeah, I thank you for sharing, both of you. And that's really gotten me thinking about how layered this idea of love is, and how much we can actually bend and stretch and perceive this like idea that maybe somewhere inside us we all know is something quite pure. like at its essence, it's quite pure. And then we add our own meaning to it, whether that's like watching Disney movies and being like, that's what love is, or whether it's our relationship with our parents or how we've grown up, blah, blah, blah. So I guess like, does that feeling resonate within you as strongly as it does with me, where there is maybe love is something that we all experience in a pure form, and then through our life experience, it kind of gets carved out into something more specific? Is that a feeling that either of you have?
Yeah. Well, this is tying into the love language that you were talking about before. And yeah, I think like I felt for a while that I wasn't particularly emotionally switched on. I thought I was quite cold. What I realized is that I was actually had a very pure expectation of what love is. It's almost just like it's kind of the most natural state of being in my mind. And during COVID was a great actually example, as you brought up. I love that idea. That was a big thought in my mind, that like during COVID, those little interactions with people felt like such a pure love for this other person in literally like a 30-second interaction, maybe less than that. Because that I felt like that was a pure moment of actually just seeing this person. It was being recognized, that there was no reason to hide anything or to be anything more than simply just like two people just like, I see this person. To take it back to relationships though, like proper romantic relationships, I'm just going to keep using my last relationship as an example, I think, throughout all this, is that I think, it changed a lot over the course of the relationship, but I think at the start there was an element of like, she grew up on Disney films, and I did not grow up on Disney films. I grew up on sci-fi and cartoons and shit, and it wasn't really simple little things. Like I wasn't someone who ever thought about doing anything big for birthdays, and wasn't one to. I didn't do gifts. I never really did gifts until the expectation went away. Once the expectation went away, then I was like, oh yeah, cool. Maybe I'll be at the shops. Like, cool. I'll get this chocolate bar. Sweet. And like that's actually enough for me. Little surprises like that's kind of fun. But there was this expectation of gifts and expectation of a certain brand of romance that I had no idea about, didn't really care about, felt kind of fake doing it. And so, yeah, I think I'm so glad that, I think again, as you said, within this, the last maybe 10 to 50 years, things have really started to change up about what expectations are. At the same time, we have The Bachelor. So I think there's like definitely 2 steps forward and 1 step back at every turn. But yeah, those expectations of what love is, for me, has always been the biggest downfall to any situation I would get myself in. Especially when I was younger, dating when I was in high school, and I was just like, I have no idea how this works, what I'm supposed to do, and especially remember one girl was just distanced herself so much from me and was crying and was carrying on, and I was like, trying to interact with her, and she's like, you're just supposed to take care of me. I'm like, can't if you don't communicate. And so I just bailed. To be fair, I was like 3 weeks in, so I'm not going to feel particularly guilty about it. But yeah, anyway,
Yeah, no, I'm just going off of that in terms of that expectation, and also just in general kind of dating, especially in the past 5, 6, 7 months. Like I've not been a relationship kind of person. I had a 2-year relationship back in 2015 is when it ended. And since then, it's just been like different forms of relationships with people. I've had a friends with benefits situation that's lasted 3 years, and absolutely adore this person. Would never date them in my bloody life. And I had to say that to him. He got into an open relationship, and he was saying like he was being really awkward about it. I was like, mate, in the nicest way possible, I never want to fucking date you. Like, I love you so much. I'm never like, this is it. Like, it's just a friendship, platonic kind of love. There just happens to be like an extra level of intimacy. But it wasn't until about October last year, like, and I'd been, you know, I've always been independent. I've always been not so much in like romantic situations. Any time that I had found myself feeling that for someone, I couldn't communicate it. I didn't feel comfortable communicating it. It made me uncomfortable. I mean, my perception of what happens in relationships was, you know, not the best in terms of, you know, my foundation. And I know that the way in which that I was expressing it, it made it seem, you know, that purity was taken out of it, and that not by anyone else, not by myself, but I was kind of my perception and my fear around love and showing love and accepting love made it feel toxic to myself. And so I shut it off. And it wasn't until about 6 months ago, 7 months ago that I just went, you know what, like the energy and the love that I've been like searching for and trying to like just give people who can't hold it and can't accept it, it's draining me. And so that energy actually needs to go into myself. And it needs to go into forming or like founding and refining the relationships that I have around me. And I've actually lost a lot of those relationships through that because I started putting boundaries in place and started standing up for myself, started saying like, this is what I need and this is what I want, rather than being a vessel for others. And thereby like being both a vessel for, you know, their own shit, but also having my energy taken out of it. And came into VU when I'm not looking for a relationship or anything. I'm not looking for that. I'm here to just enjoy the experiences that I'm having, enjoy the people around me, have that kind of sense of just overarching love for any kind of human interaction, regardless of what it is. And coming off the tail end of COVID, you know, having that experience, that 30-second just like no expectation, no performance, like just pure understanding of like, this is fucking hard. And I'm still going to show you kindness, and I'm still going to show you the simplest and like purest form of like love that I can, given the energy like levels that I have. You know, walking into Lyrebird, walking into like Land Backfest, there was just this overwhelming abundance of love. Yeah, and the relationships formed since then, both with new people, but also refining old relationships with people has been fantastic. And it's all been since going, well, like, fuck it. I'm going to do me and let the guard down, let the performance down, don't give in to expectation. Hold expectations where it needs to be held, like in terms of like, I'm not accepting less than this. I'm not settling for less than this because this is what I need and this is what I want. And that's a process that not a lot of people go through, but also is a really, really difficult one. You know, it's hard to want to give that love to someone and knowing that they're unable to hold it, and also knowing that you are unable to like fully give it as well. And it does cause conflict, but you know, it's hard to tie up exactly where the hell I was going with that one, but yeah, I'll just throw it out.
No,
you go for it.
I think, again, to tie this back into being seen, I think being seen as I said, being seen for who you are, one of the most destructive and terrifying things I think for people is being seen as something that you're not, especially in a romantic relationship, but also in your friend group. And this has been the biggest growth for me over the past like year and a half, 2 years of how long I've known the VU crew, is from I have felt that I get to just this is unadulterated. This is just exactly who I am all of the time. There's so rarely am I putting on a face. I think that's actually there's two big reasons for that for me, I think, and one of them is time. You are all new people in my life. Like, I've only known you for that amount of time, for those 2 years, and in that time, I get to, well, basically when you meet that person for the first time, you get to like, oh, this is me. You don't have know any history about me, so there's no expectations. And hanging out with, if you like, I've not gotten rid of, I've become more and more distant from almost everybody in my life who I knew from growing up in a small town. There's obviously, I still interact with my family. I've got kind of one close friend who I interact with who I've known all my life, but beyond that, it's not getting rid of anyone, but I have distanced myself from that, and I found that I have changed immensely. Well, not changed immensely. I've just kind of settled into my skin once again.
You've grown more into yourself.
Yeah.
Like this whole process of growth and change, I think there's a perception that you're changing into something new. You're transforming, like that cocoon kind of thing. You're becoming something else. It's actually, no, you're becoming more yourself.
Yeah.
And every action, every decision that you make is getting you closer and closer to that. This is what I was meant to be. The whole cocoon thing. And running off of the the idea of losing friendships and putting effort into building new ones, or kind of strengthening a connection that is already just like so integral and inherent and innate. I have to say this to a few people, like when I lose a friendship and in a hindsight and I speak to someone about it, they go like, do you feel sad for it? And I'm like, no, actually, like I actually don't. Because me ending the friendship here doesn't mean that I don't love them any less. It doesn't mean that I'm not appreciating, what that type of love in that time of my life gave me. But also, like, I'm ending this out of love and respect, because what happens if it keeps going? I've already gone through this, and I can see the pattern already, and maybe that's just my perception, and maybe but I have to trust that the decision I'm making is out of love and respect for both of us. And I'm sure that the people that I've ended those friendships with, they understand. And, having just a brief, just like, we don't need to have a big conversation about this. We don't need to have a big, like, sit down and try and figure out and make this into something it's not. Sometimes we simply just need to say, this is where I'm at. I love you. That's not going to change, but I'm unable to do this. And I love myself too much to let myself do it. And I love you too much to let, myself do it as well. But it's interesting as well in this time, as much as I've been making new connections and new friendships, and like 4 months, 5 months, I've known like VU and these guys, which is crazy because it feels like a lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like insane. The moment that I realized, like, someone asked me like, how long have you known Mikado? I was like, oh, like 4 months, but yeah. But yesterday, like, similar aspect in terms of like the theme of today's love. I spent the whole day around people that I've known outside of VU that have all come into VU. I spent the morning walking around with Journeyman Maloney, who I've known for 7 years. And we just talked and walked and it's 5 o'clock in the morning. We watched the sunrise together. And there was a strengthening of like, no, this is it. Like, we've come and gone out of each other's lives at different times, but there's a reason why he's still here, and there's a reason why he keeps coming back. And there's a reason why I keep holding on to that. There's a sense of love, and it was just that we needed to separate and come back when we needed something from each other to continue growing so that we could have this time, because now it feels like final. This is it. Same with Tilly, who is someone in the background of VU, makes great pasta. Feeds us well. Yes. You're right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Shout out to Tilly. But yeah, like, similar thing. It's 7 years known each other. It was Mother's Day yesterday, and both of us have lost our mothers. And we spent the entire day sleeping mostly, and then just eating so much bloody chocolate to the point that I felt sick in bed. And then we went to Macca's and got more chocolate, and had just a brief, we didn't talk about stuff, but there was just a sense of like, we can do nothing and be nothing together but ourselves. And ourselves are like relatively sad, so tired, kind of horny, like, like on hinge, just like, whatever. And then I go out for a walk. And I spend the day with Jaden Sixpence that night. We just an hour walking around, talking, and once again sharing the sense of love and respect and, you know, spending the whole day with these friendships outside of VU. They're all part of VU. They're all getting the same thing from VU. But refining and kind of confirming or affirming the sense of love has lasted, you know, years, but now it's become like, this is it. And saying that to all three of them, like, isn't it funny how a year ago, that day, you know, that date was the last time I'd seen Sixpence, and the same date, a year later, you know, we met at VU again, you know? Like, bizarre, but everything happens for a reason, and, you know, I can't help but think that the reason is, like, this is it. Like, we've been coming and meeting and re-meeting, but we were unable to accept or give the love that we both needed and wanted. But now we're able to, with all three of them.
Wow. Okay. So the first word that was coming to me as you were talking about all of these is like transmutation. And that's this idea of like, you know, changing a fundamental part of who you are, almost to the point of like, it's like a quantum leap, you know? If you try and fathom that, it's like you're going from one state to another. And I think that when you refine your connection with this idea of love, you are transmuting into another state of who you can be. And you'll just continue to do that until you eventually die and become pure love. Which is just a theory. It's a working theory. We don't actually know for a fact. So with this idea of like transmutation, I'd like to know how your expression has changed over time based on your connection with this love, with this idea of love. Because I think at this point we've kind of established that love runs throughout every moment of our lives in different forms, in different ways, in different interactions. That we have some amount of love for the cashier who's serving us, some amount of love for the person who's not speaking to us from across the train. So how does your connection with love, your relationship with love, actually come through in your music or your creative writing?
Simplified. I've tried to simplify a lot. That answer was going to be about my actual communication with loved ones. But then I actually made that I've realized that actually that has now come through in my writing a lot more as well. I think just a lot of walls dropped, and to over explain love to someone, especially someone who you care about, and I think in that circumstance as well, like the audience through your music, to over communicate is often a disservice, and it constantly muddies the water. And there's different communication styles, and I do like having a space to ramble on. Maybe the podcast is one of those places that I do utilize for that kind of thing. But I know that, yeah, okay, it's again totally riffing. I'm piecing together things, but like past relationship, that was my biggest thing, is when I would keep my head down, wouldn't communicate, but when it's time to communicate, I would just like fucking run my mouth, never know where I'm going with it, and just like end up like digging such a hole for myself. Or rather just like have all these scraps of paper around me going, I don't know how any of this works. I don't know. And now I've confused myself. Same with my music, I think, is like just so many little bits and pieces of writing would just be, it would make sense to me in a sense, but then often I go back to those songs and I don't know what the fuck I was talking about. And now I'm like, no, I think the audience deserves way more respect from me. That like, okay, this is exactly what I mean. This is how I'm communicating to you, and this is exactly what I'm saying. And same thing with love, is just like relatively direct, and that way it also just doesn't confuse me. Yeah. Is the biggest thing. Yeah, huge.
Yeah, I agree. You know, obviously we have different forms of art to a degree. We're both writers. I would say, like, you know, language arts. Mm-hmm. Talking Blue has been phenomenal for me in terms of, like, you know, I opened up the first piece with, you know, this poem, Cremation Rites, that very convoluted, and it was written and spoken in a way that was supposed to confuse and distance myself from the audience. Going back and doing a few of my old pieces, but then getting back into that style, like, that's all stream of consciousness. I write it, I go back and I maybe tidy things up once, and then I perform it. The fact that it's not so convoluted, yes, the metaphors, but it's pretty blunt and going, I'm unapologetically just being me. Even when I get up on stage, I'm not like, woo, like poetry. I'm just like, all right, guys, like, and that's the end of one. Let's go on to the next one. And it is painfully like blunt and painfully raw. And I don't give a fuck because like the people who are there, I appreciate and I love, but also I'm doing it for myself to a degree. And you know, the people who come up and ask me about it later, the people who go like, hey, can you send that to me? I want to give it a read. Or, hey, can you explain that to me? The people who ask questions. That is a simple form of love. Going from writing, looking at my photography progression over the past 6 months, let alone over the many like different years of doing photos. Like started off, and I never took photos of people. There's this quote, don't know who said it, which is, if you ever want to know what someone is afraid of losing in their life, look at what they photograph. And I never took photos of people. I have like a handful of photos of my family. I have a couple of photos of people, but even then it's not of their faces. It's just like, you know, and I took photos of the world and theft and shrubbery, the outside of houses. I haven't psychoanalyzed that one yet, but we're getting there. But, you know, started taking photos of people 2017, and even then it was whatever. But recently, like I look back at my photos, I'm like, no, this is a form of love. Like I'm changing the way that I'm photographing, I'm changing who I'm photographing, but also like why. I'm getting back to the root of what my philosophy of photographing is. And I lost myself for a bit there in terms of like, I'm not doing this for myself anymore, and I'm not doing this for anyone. I'm doing it for the sake of doing it now. And at detriment to myself and my bank balance. But realized that and just went, I'm taking a step back. I'm going to take photos on my digital camera, but even then, knowing that I don't really need to. And taking photos instead of just social events. Taking photos of people when I want to take photos of people inside their houses rather than outside their houses. Changing that all. And so, you know, the way in which that I'm creating and the way in which that I'm relating to my art and communicating that to an audience or to whoever is, this is a bit of me. And I'm showing you this and I'm sharing this with you because, like, not only do I love myself enough to be able to do that and trust in that, but also I love you. And if you want to, that's there for you to understand. And the people who admire me, the people who, like, and I say admire, it's not putting me on a pedestal, but simply just go like, I see you. I know you. I know that you can't directly communicate this sometimes. I know that it's really hard to, as much as you are quite blunt about things, there is a disconnect emotionally when you talk about things. The people who see me and understand me and have that connection of like, we love each other in whatever type and kind that is, you know, not only do they reach out and see me in it, but they share bits of them in their own art and their own, hey, I've got some lyrics, can you give this a read? Hey, like this is a poem I wrote, can you give this a read? Hey, I've never written a poem before, can I send it to you? Can you help me with this? Like, you know, I think there's, you know, when you look at psychoanalytical literature, when you start doing radical analysis of writing, when you learn about photography and critical kind of insights into analysing whatever art piece it is and whatever format it is, you have to understand that there's a bit of the artist in there. You can't fully separate art from artist because it's representative of them and what they're looking for and what they love or what they are lacking in love. And so I think that's my connection to love and art and craft.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we've touched on a lot in a very short amount of time. Just to kind of wrap it up, I think I'm interested to know from both of you, just for people watching at home as well, who are hearing what you're saying and are relating to it. And I feel that because we are kind of, we're kind of going down this path of creativity. For me personally, I feel a deeper connection to what the Greeks will call, and what we discussed before, agape love, which is universal love. It's this cosmic love for every piece of life that exists. And I feel like I'm going towards that through like experiencing my own creativity. And so I want to ask either of you or both of you how you could kind of help people navigate towards experiencing love in that way? Like, what did you have to personally go through to get to that point of like more openness towards this idea of agape love, universal love, unconditional love?
I think this is a tough one because I recognize that like I'm very lucky in my situation, but I found a huge amount of I find it so much easier now simply by one, I learned to be a bit more present. I still think I'm quite lost in my head. That's a perfect example. Is I had like words to say and they all got jumbled up instead of actually coming out of my mouth. Learning to be more present, which I think is a bit of a, it's cliche, but it is true, and I think that that's the reason that, as far as I can tell, all religions kind of point to that same idea: is that being present is to find. I love the idea that God is presence, God is time, and God is the present moment. And then love is God. Love is now. Love is feeling your place in that moment, which is connected to everything. You're rubbing off on me so much, Amutha. This is ridiculous. It's so frustrating. I want my logic back. I want my precision, my science. But for me personally, it was kind of throwing myself to chaos, which I guess is the present moment. But like this past year of being with of doing Vibe Union, losing my job in a job that was a fine job, and I actually, I had a lot of fun doing it, was good at it well enough, and could do that while pursuing what I wanted to pursue. But by losing it, I was like, well, now I just have to give myself to this flows back into what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, Amutha, with like throwing yourself into the stream of time and just going with that flow. And so taking the risk and not really thinking about, could there possibly be a failure point of giving myself wholeheartedly to Vibe Union, to my art, to just doing things, to just creating and being part of the world. I don't see there's any chance of failure anymore. I just see it as just, I'm just purely here right now. I don't think that's entirely true, but I have that mantra in my head, and so that still helps draw me back into the present moment, at least enough that I feel more love than I've ever felt, happier than I've ever felt, more present than I've ever felt, and more at peace with the universe. Boom.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah. I very similar in terms of just chaos. All I see is chaos, and I'm just throwing myself in and not breaking off, right? And like, I'm not going to lie, it's been fucking painful. The moment that you make this decision, okay, well, fuck it. What have I got to lose? I'm just going to throw myself into it. And I've always had this mantra, like, effort won't betray you. The effort that you put into any aspect of your life or yourself is never going to betray you. And it's usually in hindsight that you realize, like, okay, I was expecting this as the end result, but I actually got all of this instead. And so similar decision. I mean, obviously I threw myself first into the chaos of psychoanalysis to the point of just like, shit, this is where I am and why I'm here, and how other players have enacted that, but also more importantly, how I've let other things, kind of pushed me to this point. Decided to shake up and take time and throw myself instead into similar like VU, but most importantly, like just creating and craft and everything. And in that, completely letting all guards down, completely letting all masks slip. Like I go to a party and I'm like, I really can't be here. Not because of any other reason other than the fact that I'm like absolutely drained and exhausted and cannot perform. Can't put a social mask up. Like the persona is just like, I'm no persona anymore. And that's totally fine. I can be at a party with sunglasses on, dissociating to a fire pit, and everyone's like, yeah, man, like still love you and like still accept you being here. And I'm like, sweet. I can Irish goodbye. I can jump through a bush trying to hide from people. Like I can whatever. And
What is Irish goodbye?
Irish goodbying. So it's just when you disappear without saying goodbye. So Lane and I usually go slan, which is like it's Gaelic for saying goodbye, or we shockers at each other. you know, or just like Irish. I'm like, this defeats the purpose, but okay, thank you, Lane. Yeah, so that's Irish goodbye. It's like similar to a Russian hello. When you just walk in, you don't say anything.
I'm a big fan of the Russian hello. That's one place that I'm always like, oh, we gotta do all the greetings. I'm so bad at all that kind of stuff.
You walk in, sunglasses on, you know, cap back, looking like upright death, you know, 30 seconds in the microwave, and you just go like, I'm going to sit here and roll a cigarette and just associate into the fire for a little while. Yeah. It's just in not being able to perform, in not being able to like meet what people expect you to be as in just deciding like, nah, fuck it. And then seeing the amount of appreciation and love, even from like day one of just rocking up to Lyrebird. I'm going to close off on this one thing, which is the moment that I realized I was being seen and accepted for myself by people who I've never fucking met in my entire life, like met occasionally, the fact that you remembered us when we rocked up, and I was like, oh shit. Was actually it was the second time that I went to Lyrebird, and I'd taken these photos, I sent them, which was terrifying for myself, like hated it, panicked, phone off, phone in another room, went and had like 5 cigarettes, came back and you were all like, this is fucking amazing, what the hell? I had Mash come up to me, MQ, after his set, and he was like, hey, like, you know, first conversation we actually had in person. He's like, hey, like, I just want to say thank you so much for taking these beautiful photos. And I was like, thank you so much for giving me something beautiful to take photographs of. And then he said, you know, I was watching you when I was playing my set, and I was like, in my mind, I was like, I wish that she would sit down and just enjoy the music. But then I realized that this is how you experience, you know, the show, and this is how you experience life. And I was so taken aback. I was like, yeah, man, I just love photos. Like, but, you know, it stuck with me, and it was one of the reasons why I kept coming back. Not really why, but it just kind of affirmed, like, this is where I need to be. That just sense of love and appreciation, you know, knowing that that's how I show my love and appreciation for that time and that moment in my life. You know, it just, yeah, that's how, like, just putting that kind of mindset and that perception and that understanding that, like, people show love and appreciation in different ways, and you have to find what it is that they're trying to say in that. And knowing that there are people who can understand the way that you are showing love in your own way as well. That's how I got here.
Just to fall back on one word that has come up several times, and I think summarizes this really nicely, is expectations. Dropping your expectations. Dropping your expectations of how someone else should communicate love. Dropping your expectations of where you are going to find love. Dropping your expectations of what your future's going to be, what relationships should look like. Simply like drop your expectations of what your day is going to be. Like if your schedule falls apart, but you find yourself in a place you didn't expect, learn to appreciate what is happening in this moment. What can you get out of it? This sense of chaos, it is fucking exhausting lately, the amount of effort and energy we are putting into it. But at the same time, and this has been a running theme lately from episode Wrecked all the way up to this one, is that I have been so tired at times, but I have never been so energized simply by rocking up to different things every day. Like this is a cold, miserable Monday morning. This is how we're going to kick off our week. Like is just by sitting here and talking about this kind of shit. And then I've got band practice later, and it's just like this constant stream of stuff happening. And I love that sense of just chaos, removing expectations, because VU keeps growing in ways that we never expected. We keep meeting people we never expected. Love will find you in ways that you never expected. Drop those expectations.
Amen. So if I could just wrap this all up, what we've just said is, it seems to me that there is some kind of a tier list that we can go through of how to reach this very essential core love for yourself and for the people around you. And it really starts with your environment, who you spend your time with. If people on a very base level are not making you feel good, you know, you don't need to ditch them altogether, but create some space and get back to who you are. And like through creating space, you're also allowing new people to come into your life. So once those new people come in, or once you've created space for yourself, drop the expectations. Once those expectations aren't there of how you need to receive love, how you need to give love, that also leads to communication. You know, what's your self-talk like? What's your talk towards others like? Are you walking past someone and judging them for what they're wearing, you know? Because those things are not a reflection of that person. It's a reflection of your relationship with yourself. And that will tie into judgment, you know? Judging other people is judging yourself. So once you can kind of notice that you are judging, you just don't let it take over. Like sometimes that it comes up unintentionally, but just to acknowledge that you're judging someone and move towards not wanting to do that purely because why would you? Why would you want to do that to someone? Why would you want to do that to yourself? And so once we get past judgment, which is a huge thing to get past, we reach presence. If you get presence down pat, you're there. All right, you are the universe, you are God, you are that unconditional love, you are that everythingness that exists within all of us. And if you can connect to that presence within you, you can see it within other people, and the shells around that person just doesn't even matter anymore. I feel like that's when you can try and experience that agape love, that true universal unconditional love, and life will just flow. And I feel like we're all tapping into that stream right now, and we're really appreciating the connections we have. We're around amazing people. So if you're vibing with us and if you're feeling what we're feeling, then, you know, hopefully this was like a nice little manuscript to get to this point. And better yet, reach out to our community, you know, join us on Vibe Union, like vibe.union on Instagram, or just subscribe to this channel to get more content like this. Plug into people who are already watching, which seems redundant. But anyway, thank you for joining us. Any last thoughts before we adios to these people? Nope. Okay. Excellent. Exactly how we should leave it. Thank you for joining us. Episode 31. We love you all really and truly.